Support for Headline Humboldt is made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Coming up now on Headline Humboldt, President Donald Trump continues his war on public broadcasting by firing several board members from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Also, Chris Chu from the Eureka Chinatown Project joins us to preview this year's 4th Annual Chinatown Street Festival and explain why this is important history for us all to remember, especially now. Coming up next on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. The avalanche of chaos, funding freezes, spiked tariffs, firings, and haphazard deportations from the Trump administration in its first 100 days has led to the inevitable economic cost many anticipated. The U.S. economy, healthy when Trump took office, is now contracting for the first time since the pandemic. This joins the loss of jobs, the plunging stock market, cratered consumer confidence, and countless other distress signals that form a dramatic and unprecedented 5-alarm signal fire. The United States is in distress, and it's all stemming from a ritualistic kind of self-immolation brought on by culture wars and intolerance. Americans are afraid. Is there a bottom in this plunge toward madness? Trump, meanwhile, continues to pat himself on the back for winning rigged golf tournaments, inhumane deportations, unjust jailings, and the crucifixion of his enemies in media, business, and politics. ICE agents can now enter homes without a warrant, given the right excuse. Judges are being arrested. Court rulings get ignored. Law firms are being blackmailed into defending crooked cops, and much of the media has been intimidated into going quietly along. I don't like ruining your dinner with all this bad news, but we all need to hear it, and we all need to understand. This is really happening. Our guest today, Chris Chu from the Eureka Chinatown Project, will join us shortly to preview this year's street festival, a chance for us all to come together as a community and build some much-needed cohesion. But first, the news. The environmental organization CalTrout, in partnership with the State Coastal Conservancy, has acquired 4 parcels of former ranch land amounting to 175 acres along the Elk River. One of the parcels will be deeded to the Wiyot tribe and represents a return of ancestral land. According to the CalTrout press release, this marks a significant step in the ongoing efforts to protect and restore the Elk River estuary. 3 parcels will eventually be transferred to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's existing Elk River Wildlife Area for stewardship and ecological restoration. The Elk River is the largest tributary to Humboldt Bay. It supports sustainable local agriculture, is a hub for essential fish habitat, and flows through several residential communities. However, years of intensive land uses from timber harvest and agriculture have caused significant changes across the landscape, shifting the balance away from functional ecosystems and native fish populations. This acquisition and land transfer will drive forward efforts by CalTrout to rebalance this working landscape with expanded tidal marsh and salmon habitat, while simultaneously reducing threats from flooding and sea level rise. The Wiyot parcel was traditionally the place where tribal members harvested salmon, and it figures prominently in their mythology. It will be called Quanutchguk, or a ridge comes down there. In its continued efforts to disrupt public media in the United States, the Trump administration is now trying to fire 3 members of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting's board of directors. 3 members of the board, Tom Rothman, Diane Kaplan, and Laura Ross, each received an email from Trent Morse, the deputy director of White House personnel, that notified the board members that their positions were terminated immediately. If the terminations go through, it would rob the board of a quorum and significantly reduce its ability to operate. It would also open the board up for Trump to appoint like-minded replacements. CPB is now suing the Trump administration, arguing that Trump lacks the authority to fire board members, as CPB is not a government agency. This comes as Trump waits on Congress to move on his request to rescind funds that have already been allocated to CPB. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting, formed in 1967, is a private corporation that helps support and steward hundreds of public media organizations, including radio and TV stations such as KEET TV. Catherine Marr, CEO of National Public Radio, appeared on The Daily Show this week to explain why the country needs public media. Without such services, rural areas in the country will lose the ability to get their stories heard, and children will lose vital educational programming.
But more importantly, I think the big misconception is that this money goes to NPR or to PBS. The reality is that the vast majority of funds in public broadcasting resources go directly to local stations. So I'm talking about, I did a little research. I'm talking about WK.
Oh, this is, okay,
yes.
all right. Bring that NPR shit here. Oh, I get it.
I think it's WMUK, WKAR, or the stations where you grew up.
Kalamazoo, Michigan. Yes,
there you
exactly.
go.
Yes,
Exactly.
WMUK. Indeed.
And so stations like that, they get a significant part of their funding comes from public funds. And that really matters, especially when you get into rural parts of the country. So I was in Asheville, North Carolina recently, as we all know, devastating damage in Hurricane Helene. They have enormous radio towers that broadcast across that topography, because it's like this, it's the Appalachian Mountains. Same thing's true. Eastern Kentucky. You get out to the Rocky Mountains. Same thing is true. Huge swaths of the country. That's expensive to maintain. We cover 99.7% of the country with our broadcast coverage, and that allows for Americans to have access to news, even in places where news deserts are growing, where disasters happen. That's what your federal funds go to. They go to your local station, they go to your local reporter. I think that Americans need to be aware that it is going to be harmful to the system, right? So a lot of us probably grew up on kids television, PBS Kids. It is a crown jewel of American public broadcasting programming. And whether you think about, your history with Mr. Rogers, whether you're thinking about Sesame Street, whether you're thinking about more contemporary programming, that is so important, and that is under threat. When you think about your local radio stations, those may not be able to provide the same sorts of services. And the first thing that's going to go, I have to tell you, is going to be local reporters' jobs. We have news deserts. 20% of Americans live in a place where they have no local news coverage other than public radio. What that means is that when we lose public funding, we are no longer going to be able to cover things like what matters in the State House. We're not going to be able to cover natural disasters. We're not going to be able to cover issues of, local politics, issues of what's happening in your local sports team. We know that the existence of local news, and public radio in particular, contributes to lower rates of polarization, higher rates of civic engagement, and higher rates of civic trust. This is foundational infrastructure for our country. Even when we disagree, this is the sort of thing that can start to heal some of those disagreements and bring us back together.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, I'm Jay Schwanke. Public television opens your eyes to untold possibilities. Whether it's a moment of calm and time to sit and enjoy the beauty of flowers, on my show Life in Bloom, an introduction to new and exciting places with experts like Samantha Brown, or an opportunity to discover the wonders of the animal kingdom on Nature. No matter your age, there is always something new to uncover. Show your support by giving to your local stations as part of Public Media Giving Days.
My art is my voice.
There's a lot working against the process of life right now.
I really wanted to be able to do something greater with our art.
Telling a story, an emotional problem that I have come across, and how I try to overcome that using art.
And that reading poetry. You have finally broken the barrier of not speaking your truth and you were doing it.
Artists Breaking Barriers. Join us for 2 free exclusive screenings in Arcata and Crescent City. Register at KEET.org.
Joining us now in studio is Chris Chu from the Eureka Chinatown Project. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming down. You guys have a big weekend planned for the Chinatown Project.
Yes, we do.
The Street Fest, right? That's going to happen on Saturday.
Correct.
And we'll get to that. But let's first start sort of with a bigger picture. What is the Chinatown Project? What are you guys trying to do in Old Town to, honor Eureka history?
Yeah, so the Eureka Chinatown Project is actually part of a larger organization called Humboldt Asian and Pacific Islanders in Solidarity.
Okay, Hoppy, right?
Hoppy, yeah. And so our aim is to create a more inclusive and healed community through engagement and telling a lot of these histories. And so the Eureka Chinatown Project in specific looks to reclaim, to acknowledge and honor the history and culture of our first Chinese citizens here in Humboldt County.
Yeah. Now, for a lot of people, there might not be a huge awareness that there was a pretty thriving Chinese community here for a long time, but there was, right? And that was brought here by economic factors back in the day, but there was mining and other industries that brought them here to live and work for decades, right?
Yeah, so with the gold rush, a lot of people were drawn to America. A lot of people from China, specifically southern China, came over here, came to California specifically. And in the early 50s, many Chinese started making their way up to Humboldt, settling along the Klamath and the Eel River, getting engaged with mining. And as time grew, the community grew slowly. A lot of people were involved in farming, in a lot of industry around, eventually in the railroads in the 70s, in the 1870s. And so the community grew to about 200 to 230 people in Eureka alone, and more people in the surrounding community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what did that look, I mean, from people who are like going through Eureka now or live in Eureka, what is the area that those communities were in? So people can kind of remember.
Nowadays it would be around 4th and 5th Street in near Old Town Eureka, where we have a street that we got renamed to Charlie Moon Way, where there's also a mural there. So that's the historic Chinatown. It was really small, just about 1 block, where all these people lived in kind of a segregated area in Eureka.
Yeah, and now of course there was some history there that happened, but we'll get to that in a minute. For the Chinatown Project, I mean, it's various things that are going on. There's a painting of murals, for one thing, right? And several of those have been painted. Are there going to be any more?
Hopefully. We don't have any plans for that right now, but we have a mural up in Charlie Moon Way called Foul.
Yeah, and it's beautiful.
Yes.
I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous, yeah. But what else can people expect to sort of slowly materialize out of this project over time?
Yeah, so at the base of E Street, E and 1st, near Dick Taylor's, we're going to be putting in a monument to the historic Eureka Chinatown that's trying to not reshape, but reframe the history of the Chinese community and their experience in a more beautiful way, in a more inclusive way, and to share that knowledge with the community.
Yeah. Now, there's at root in all of this is the Chinese expulsion, 1885,
Correct.
I believe, right? And that was when there was basically a movement. There was an accidental shooting, I guess, that happened where a councilman got shot, and it was because there were 2 Chinese men who were fighting. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there was a gunfight that happened in Chinatown, and Councilman David Kendall was walking home about 6 o'clock after his work and was caught in the crossfire, along with a young boy who was also shot in the foot. But within the hour, Councilman Kendall was dead. And there was a mob of about 600 people clamoring for either the death of the Chinese or the expulsion of the community at large.
Yeah, and from what I understand, they all met at a place, right? And there was like a debate that went on there as to whether to kill all the Chinese or to make them leave.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, even as horrific as it was, it may have been the humanitarian choice in that moment to send them off rather than kill them all. That's the kind of bleak and dark attitude those people had in that moment. But what happened to those people after that decision was made?
So they were given 24 hours to leave Eureka. So they were all grouped up and stored in a warehouse overnight by the docks. And it took about 48 hours for them to collect all the Chinese residents and some of the outlying residents of Eureka. And they put them on 2 boats and shipped them down to San Francisco. And in San Francisco, the officials weren't notified. No one knew that these Chinese people were coming. So when they got there, they dispersed, and we don't have much record of where they went
after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to track down where these people
and what further trauma was visited upon them after being uprooted. And these people lost all their businesses because they had buildings that were full of like stock if they were merchants, and all that stuff was just claimed by the whole broader community. Correct?
Yeah, the following year there was a lawsuit brought to the city of Eureka to try and get reparations for that, which was the first lawsuit in American history for those kinds of reparations.
Yeah. And do you know what the outcome of that was? Or?
It was decided that these people didn't actually own the businesses, so they were decided against.
Yet another example of unfortunate American history. So you actually were a history major at Cal Poly Humboldt, and I have here your term paper that you wrote, which was, quote, Pulling Back the Redwood Curtain, the Chinese Experience in Humboldt in the 19th and 20th Centuries.
Correct.
And it's well written. You can find it online at the Cal Poly Humboldt Digital Commons, so I encourage people to take a look. But in there you talk a lot about sort of the economic factors that brought people here, and that it wasn't basically society had a need for these people, and we drew them here to do work that whites weren't willing to do. And I wonder if you notice any parallels now with what's going on in our current society in terms of immigration and, when we need people, we bring them in, but then when we decide we don't need them anymore, there's like this rejection process that kind of happens.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's that we don't need them, but it's that we're told that we don't need them.
Yeah, and they're vilified. And,
we need a scapegoat for the socioeconomic problems that are going on.
Yeah.
And so these people were doing work that was integral to the formation of the country, to California specifically. Over 90% of the railroad workers were Chinese. Many of the farms in Eureka were run by Chinese citizens. So yeah, we had needs that had to be filled, but people were scared and were told that these are bad people, that they're taking your jobs, that they're the ones that are the reason for your economic or social woes.
Yeah.
And so they have to go.
Yeah. And it strikes me, especially as we're talking about, the uprooting of all these people and the shipping them down to San Francisco without San Francisco being notified. There's so many resonances with things we've seen in the last 5 years, like illegal immigrants, quote unquote, sent to New York City without warning to prove some kind of political point by the governor of Texas. And now the deportation and sort of the assumption that because someone has a tattoo, whatever the tattoo is, somehow it's gang affiliated, and all this fear mongering, and we kind of are repeating the same history over and over again. And people have thought throughout the years that maybe we've grown immune to that kind of thing. But part of the problem, I think, is that over the years it's become problematic, according to some, for us to teach the mistakes we've made as a culture historically, like whether it's slavery and the Civil War. You were a history major. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the teaching of history and its value in moments like this to kind of help us get away from these types of behaviors or knee-jerk sort of xenophobic outbursts.
Yeah, there's a lot of cycles that happen in history over and over, and when we don't recognize those or when we push them away, we're not able to learn from those mistakes and move forward. And so like with the Chinese experience, if we don't recognize that something happened that we did wrong, then we're never going to be able to move forward from that. And also we lose out on a lot of different perspectives, different stories that are very important, that are part of our culture and our history, that our community needs to know about.
I think that's a really interesting point. We always talk about, when we look back at history, there are people who are like, oh, if we teach about slavery, then we're teaching how we were evil as an American country or whatever. But we're also teaching that Americans survived, and Americans came back, and Americans fought for social justice and achieved growth as a democracy. And that's also part of the American story. It's not just the oppression that occurred, but it's also the fighting of that oppression and the value of that kind of resistance in the face of tyranny, And it seems like there's value in that lesson as well as just teaching, well, here's where America made a mistake. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, the resistance and the resilience of our communities is very important. And it can be inspiring to us today when we see similar things happening. If we know that people were able to stand up in history back then, we can do that again and draw inspiration from that.
Exactly right, I appreciate that. Now, can I ask why you chose this particular subject for your term paper? What was it about this instance in history that inspired you?
Yeah, so I'm Chinese, so I was interested in that cultural aspect of it, but I was very naive going into this history. I knew nothing about it. I was actually looking for the interesting and cool ways that the Chinese culture melded with the Euro-Americans of the time and how that history played out. And as I dug more into it, I realized this isn't a happy story. This isn't a fun story. It's very important, but also very sad at the same time.
Yeah. How did you react when you heard that? Did you kind of look at this community in a different way, or were you just...
I was very shocked, but unfortunately, the more you learn about history, the more you learn that there's always something bad that had happened in the past. So I didn't judge current Humboldt on it, but it's definitely brought to light why there might not be as big of an Asian community here now, and what the repercussions of that are down the line.
One of the things that people don't realize about this whole thing also is that Eureka was kind of one of the first to do this sort of thing, and it became a model for other communities to follow. So this sort of desperate and violent moment in Eureka led to other moments in other communities throughout the country kind of doing the same sorts of thing, right?
Yeah, there was a man, I can't remember his name, but he went and used what was called the Eureka method to go to different towns and incite or help organize the expulsion of other Chinese communities around California.
Yeah, interesting. Well, yeah, I encourage people to check out your paper. It's well written and thorough.
Thank you.
And I think that having that kind of history in mind when people go and check out the events this weekend will give you a new perspective and a sense of the beauty and grace of some of these monuments. If I'm not mistaken, the one at the foot of E Street and First, or Waterfront, whatever it is, down there is going to have a poem as part of it. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be a poem. So it's being constructed by artist John King and landscape architect Jessica Hill. And we're also going to have a verse by, I believe, Daryl Chin engraved into it. Yeah, local poet. So it's going to be beautiful, and it's kind of going to show the history in an artistic way of what happened to the Chinese and how they were gone for a long time and their reemergence back here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because at that spot you're actually within, I think, sight of where a lot of the actual, moving off of the Chinese occurred. So that is it's a beautiful spot anyway. But knowing that you're kind of in proximity to history gives it even a little bit more.
Very powerful.
Spirit. So we're looking at the flyer now for the Chinatown Festival. It's going to be May 3rd on Saturday. What are we looking for?
So from 4 to 6 p.m., we have a professional lion dance troupe who's coming to visit us again, Lion Dance Me, and they're going to be blessing local businesses in Old Town Eureka. So lion dancers have traditionally been used to ward off evil spirits and to usher in good luck and happiness. And then from 6 to 9, we're going to have the festival itself happening alongside Arts Live. So we're going to have a lot of cultural performances. We're having taiko drummers, loud dancers, and this year is very special because it's the 140th anniversary of the Eureka Chinese expulsion event.
Wow,
Yeah.
Okay. Nice round number.
Yeah, so we have, luckily, the Piedmont East Bay Children's Choir coming to celebrate with us, and their artistic director wrote a play an opera called Echoes of Eureka that is talking about the expulsion event through the eyes of Eureka Chinese citizen Charlie Wei Lum, and then exploring a little bit of the aftermath of the expulsion event.
Yeah. Now that's an interesting story, as you mentioned to me. He basically learned about this history through Gene Failser's book, right?
Driven Out.
Driven Out, which we've covered here on the show before, and is also, we've done some other projects at KEET. We have a close connection with Gene. She's a friend of the show. But her book is fantastic, and it's a really stark telling of this story, and he was inspired by it, so he went and wrote an opera.
Yes.
Now, is this a Western opera or a Chinese opera? Is there a difference that we should be aware of?
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
It premieres on Saturday, or on Friday actually at HSU.
Okay. And it'll be there Saturday. Now, for folks who are watching on Sunday, it's also going to be playing on Sunday as well.
Yes,
correct?
It'll be at the Morris Graves Museum at 2 p.m.
Okay.
General admission, $5, I believe $2 for kids, or maybe free for kids.
Yeah.
And it should be very interesting.
So what else do we have going on Sunday? Is there anything else people might still be able to catch?
Yeah, on Sunday we also have Ink to Paper, which is something we're putting on where local Asian and Asian American artists are reading their poetry, alongside some artistic slides to accompany that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for on Saturday, though, that's the main day.
Yep.
What event in particular are you most looking forward to?
I'm really looking forward to this opera. I've heard that it's a real tearjerker.
Yeah.
And Eric Tuan, the director, also wrote an opera or an artistic piece about the Nagasaki bombing. So he's very good at evoking these emotional aspects and bringing to light, really important history.
Well, and I think that that's an interesting point right there. I mean, if you, on the level of tragedies, you have Nagasaki, which is obviously a dropping of an atomic bomb on a population of people in Japan, and the Chinese expulsion. I mean, and they're emotionally equivalent. The volume of people may be different, but the crime, is inhumane. And I think that that's a link that we should be aware of and not be so willing to excuse our mistakes in history because they do have long-lasting repercussions. What is the how much is all this costing, and how can people help if they want to help fund some of this or raise money?
It's pretty expensive to run a festival and to build this monument. But if people want to help, whatever resources they have, whether it's time or money, on our website you can donate, or you can check out our volunteer information. And we also have a GoFundMe for the Eureka Chinatown Project and for the monument to try and get that built.
So what is your guys' website?
Hoppy Humboldt.
Hoppy Humboldt, and that's
hoppyhumboldt.org.
HAPI,
Yes.
right? .org. Now, you've been involved in this for how long?
Only a few months now.
Okay.
Yeah, I've started in February.
So what was your story, and how did you feel about kind of stumbling into this job? Because obviously it seems to fit your profile as an academic.
Yeah, it
just
seems like it
perfectly.
was made perfectly for me.
Yeah.
I was looking for a way to get involved with the local community, and I love history. I wanted to be involved, and I was just looking for jobs on Craigslist, and I saw the Eureka Chinatown Project needed a program coordinator.
Yeah.
And despite being maybe underqualified for it, I went in and took my chance and got to meet a bunch of wonderful people. And I left the interview thinking, well, if I didn't get the job, at least
I've made contacts.
I met some great people,
Yeah.
and you know, this is an opportunity for me to at least volunteer. But they liked me, and here we are. They threw me right into it, and so we've been, you know, really planning this and organizing the street festival and executing it now this weekend.
Yeah. Well, I talked to a lot of people, and you are one of the more articulate representatives, and you've got your handle on the history, which I think is important. One of the things that's most inspiring about this to me is, you know, given the moment that we're in, there's not very many examples of where history in the past is actively changing how we're living now and the future. And this is an example of that, and it seems to be such a contrast to all of the ugliness that we're seeing in so many other areas of politics and, you know, the country more broadly, that I think this is a really, really refreshing example, and it's a wonderful way for a student of history to be able to put that kind of education to work. I think,
definitely.
You know? Yeah. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on the show and doing what you're doing. And once again, if people want to check it out, the website is Hoppy Humboldt. You can go there and figure out how to donate if you want.
Yep.
And if we can look at that flyer one more time, May 3rd, it's on Saturday is the main deal, but it's also going to be happening on Friday and on Sunday.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes.
How many people do you guys expect to have out there?
We're hoping for quite a bit, maybe 1,000, 1,500.
Year of the Snake, right?
Yes.
So what does that mean? Is that a good year for us coming up, or what?
Hopefully. Yeah, each of the Chinese zodiacs have their own, you know, flair to it, and there's good in each of them. So
yeah, it's kind of like the yin and the yang of both. Right?
Yeah.
They've got good sides and bad sides. So whether or not you're, I'm a Capricorn. I don't know if I was. I was born in the year of the rabbit. So we'll have to see what the Capricorn rabbit.
Yeah, I'm a rat, so.
Okay, well.
Yeah, he won the zodiac race, so yeah, that's a good one.
Well, I appreciate you coming in, man.
Yeah, thank you.
And have fun this weekend. That's it for this week. Thank you guys for joining us and for checking it out. Remember to check out our podcast, Neon Galactic, at youtube.com/@neongalactic for some interesting and fun conversations about the universe, philosophy, and UFOs. So it's a fun channel. Stay tuned, stay informed.